Here's something I've noticed after years of teaching herbalism. Topical remedies are some of the most misunderstood tools we have. Sometimes they work beautifully, almost magically, and sometimes they just don't. That's not because herbs are wrong, and not because the recipe necessarily failed, but because we're either choosing the wrong topical remedy, or we're asking the topical remedy to do work that really belongs to the entire system. When most people think of topical remedies, they think of salves and maybe creams, something like a little jar on the counter, something soothing, something familiar. And while those remedies can be wonderful, working with herbs through the skin is far more expansive and, in many cases, far more effective than most people realize. Topical herbal remedies are often the very first medicines that people make. Actually, salves and lip balms were my first herbal class over 25 years ago, and I was immediately hooked. And more than that, I still make and cherish these remedies. Just in the past week, I've made a St. John's wort lip balm and a cayenne salve. And I'll share more about how I'm using these in just a bit. So in today's episode, I'll explore when topical herbal remedies really shine and when they fall short. And we're going to be looking beyond salves and creams to include things like herbal baths, fomentations, compresses, infused oils, poultices, and yes, even suppositories. And if you stick with me until the end, I'll also share a free way you can go deeper into this way of thinking about herbal medicine, especially if you're ready to move beyond guessing and into real confidence with your remedies. Not so you can use topical remedies for everything per se, but so you can choose them wisely, with clarity and with deeper understanding of how the body actually receives herbal support. All right, let's dive in. So when we say topical, most people think of something that goes on the skin. And yes, that's part of it, but topical herbal medicine is really broader than that. It includes the skin itself, right? Also underlying tissues. It can also include the nervous system and also mucosal surfaces where absorption can be quite different. Topical medicine is really about how herbs meet the body. I like to think of it as this way. Topical medicine is about choosing the right doorway into the body. Sometimes the skin is the perfect doorway. Other times, it's not. Another reason topical remedies get misunderstood is that we tend to reduce them to just a few forms, usually salves, creams, etc. But herbalists have always worked with a much wider range of topical applications. So let's dive into those now. First up are infused oils. So infused oils are often the starting point for many other topical remedies, and they are far more powerful than they're sometimes given credit for. So when they're made well, infused oils can be deeply effective medicines. But that's a really important caveat because one of the most common mistakes that I see is that infused oils are often made really, really weakly. So the ratio between the herb and the oil really matters. If there isn't enough plant material, you just kind of end up with something that maybe smells nice, but it just doesn't offer a lot in the way of therapeutic support. At their simplest, infused oils are made by infusing finely cut or even powdered herbs into a carrier oil. But even that choice kind of opens up this whole world of consideration, right? Because different carrier oils interact with the skin in different ways. So some are heavier, some are more protective, others are lighter and absorb more quickly. So choosing the right oil is part of the medicine, and it's a whole exploration in itself. I honestly used infused oils every single day. So not a day goes by that I don't reach for one in some way or another, whether it's for dry skin or for muscle tension or simply as a part of daily body care. Infused oils are especially nourishing to the skin. They're not deeply penetrating in some ways that other preparations can be, but they're very lasting. So they support the surface tissues, they help maintain the integrity of the skin, and they offer a really gentle, steady kind of support that can build over time. All right, next let's talk about salves, creams, and lip balms. So salve, creams, and lip balms all grow out of infused oils. They're essentially oils that have been modified in some way to change how they sit on the surface of the skin. So salves and lip balms are made by thickening an infused oil, usually with a wax, like beeswax. So this creates a more protective layer on the skin, which then makes them especially useful when you want the remedy to just stay put. So think about this for like dry or cracked skin, chapped lips, of course, irritated patches of skin, or really areas that need protection from the wind, the cold, or even frequent washing. Because salves create a bit of a barrier, they tend to work best for kind of surface level concerns. So they're wonderful for supporting the skin itself, for delivering herbs slowly and steadily over time. And this is really one reason that salves are such beloved kind of everyday remedies, right? They're easy to apply, they're portable, really forgiving. I'll give you a personal example. I just made a cayenne salve, and I've been using it on my foot at night because I've been dealing with a foot injury and some lingering pain there. So this has been really helpful because cayenne helps bring circulation to the area, which is especially important when tendons and ligaments are involved because they just don't naturally get a lot of blood flow. Cayenne also helps reduce pain signaling by affecting substance P. That's a neurotransmitter that's involved in just how we perceive pain. So here's what I do. Just before bed, I slather on the salve, and then I put on an old sock just to keep it in place and then also protect my bed linens. And then, and this part really matters, I wash my hands because you do not want to accidentally put cayenne salve in your eyes. Trust me on this one. Well, within minutes of putting on the salve, I can really feel the warmth of the cayenne, and it's just been an important part of my own healing process. All right, let's talk about creams. They're a little different. They're made by combining infused oils and butters with water, creating this emulsion. And this really changes how the remedy interacts with the skin. So creams tend to feel lighter, they absorb more quickly, and they are often just immediately soothing, especially for irritated, inflamed, or heat-prone skin. And I absolutely love my own calendula cream. I use it every single day. And one of the things that I appreciate about it is that it's really a powerful way to protect and maintain skin health. So for me, it's part of my beauty regimen. But over the years, I've had hundreds of students make this recipe, and I've heard countless stories about how the same cream that I use for beauty actually helps to resolve acute rashes and other irritating skin conditions. So that's one of the things I love about herbal preparations, that they can be supportive in more than one way at the same time. So one thing to note is that because creams contain water, they can feel more refreshing and cooling than salves, but they also require more care in both the making of them and the storage. So they're often chosen when comfort and quick absorption matter, or when someone doesn't enjoy the heavier feel of oils or salves. And also, just as a quick note, because creams contain water, they're also more prone to microbial growth. So some people choose to use a preservative for that reason, to help inhibit bacteria or mold from developing over time. And this is just a kind of a tangent, but one common point of confusion I see a lot is that people think that vitamin E is a preservative. And yes, it can help slow oxidation and keep oils from going rancid for a period of time, but it actually doesn't inhibit microbial growth. And so it plays a different role entirely. Well, lip balms deserve their own mention because the lips are a unique environment. So like salves, lip balms are made by combining infused oils with beeswax that create this firmer, more protective preparation. You know, the skin on the lips, it's thinner, there's more exposure there, it's more vulnerable to dryness and cracking than other areas of the body. And so because of that, lip balms really shine when you need frequent protective applications, especially in conditions like dry, windy, or just really cold conditions. So as I mentioned earlier, I just made a St. John's wort lip balm, which is a wonderful protectant from the sun, but it's also one of the best remedies I know for cold sores. So I made it because I started to feel that familiar tingle and a little bump the other day on my lip, so it prompted me to make up a batch because, as you can imagine, I never love getting cold sores. They're painful, they're not necessarily attractive, and what I love less is doing a podcast video with one. So I really needed to get this episode recorded, and luckily the herbs came to the rescue. Whipped up a batch of that, and within 24 hours, the cold sore was diminishing. So yay, herbs work. Okay, so to wrap up this section, salves, creams, and lip balms are best used when you're working with surface tissues, dryness, irritation, or minor discomfort, and when consistency matters, right? Because they're wonderful allies for daily care, but they're not designed to penetrate deeply or address systemic patterns. They're something we tend to use frequently for surface areas. And that distinction becomes even more important as we move into other forms of topical medicine. Hey there, just a quick note. If you'd like to hear from me in a more personal way, I'd love to have you in my free text community. I send a couple of texts every week, things like behind the scenes updates, herbal thoughts that I'm chewing on, and little sparks of joy I don't always share anywhere else. To join, just text the word ROOT to 1-509-383-8398. And if you ever want to break up, no hard feelings. Just text STOP to the same number and you'll be opted out immediately. My goal is to make it so juicy and so fun that you look forward to getting my texts each week. Okay, now back to the show. Okay, let's move on to a different medium entirely, liniments. So liniments are typically alcohol or vinegar-based preparations, which means they interact with the skin in a different way. So unlike oils, which tend to nourish and support the surface tissues, liniments are more drying and they're more penetrating. So they can evaporate quickly on the skin, but they do tend to carry herbs deeper into the tissues. So because of that, liniments are often chosen for situations involving deep muscle soreness, perhaps joint pain, or areas where you just need more immediate penetrating relief rather than long-term surface support. They're not usually something you're going to reach for with dry or sensitive skin, but again, incredibly effective when circulation, tension, or just deeper discomfort is part of the picture. And liniments are really another good reminder that topical remedies aren't interchangeable, right? The base, whether it's oil or water or alcohol, really matters as much as the herbs themselves. All right, speaking of water, let's talk about fomentations and compresses. These are some of the most powerful and often overlooked forms of topical herbal medicine. So at their core, fomentations and compresses involve applying herbal teas to the body using warmth or cold, usually through a cloth. And what makes them different from salves or creams is that they work much more directly with circulation. So there's a tissue response there that we're looking for, and also we're roping in the nervous system. So warm fomentations are often used when there's tension or tightness or stagnation or pain. That's because the warmth helps relax the tissues, it encourages blood flow, and it really invites movement into areas that feel stuck or rigid. And this can be especially helpful for sore muscles, joint discomfort, or areas that feel tight and contracted. Cool compresses, on the other hand, are typically used when there's heat, swelling, or irritation. So they can be really soothing and calming, just helping to quiet inflammation, for example, or just ease a hot, reactive feeling in the tissues. What's important here is that fomentations and compresses aren't just about putting herbs on the body. They're about creating this physiological response, and the heat and the cold can help change that circulation. They change how tissues receive oxygen and nutrients, and they send strong signals to the nervous system about whether an area needs to soften, calm, or slow down. So that's one reason that fomentations and compresses can sometimes feel dramatically effective even after just a short application. So they're working with the body's own responses, not just delivering constituents through the skin. They're especially useful when you want more immediate effect or when a situation calls for something more active than a salve, but still localized and topical. One of my favorite applications for these are simple headaches due to either muscular tension or excessive heat. So that's the rundown on fomentations and compresses. Like many traditional herbal practices, they're simple, they're direct, and incredibly effective, yet often forgotten in modern herbalism because they might not be as tidy or convenient as something in a jar. All right, next up, one of my favorites, baths and soaks, which work on the entire body at once. So unlike salves or fomentations, baths don't just target one small area, right? When you immerse your body, or even just your feet and hands, you're really engaging the whole system, the skin, the muscles, the nervous system, all at the same time. So this makes herbal baths one of the most holistic forms of topical medicine, and honestly, I think they're one of the most underrated as well. So baths aren't just about what's going on the skin, right? It's the warmth of the water, the active immersion, and the slowing down that just naturally happens, and they all play a role. Muscles soften, breathing tends to deepen, the nervous system often shifts out of this heightened reactive state into something calmer, more receptive. So here's how I personally work with herbal baths. I make a really strong herbal tea using whatever herbs the moment calls for. So a favorite blend for me is, say, chamomile, which is profoundly relaxing, calendula, which supports the skin health and helps promote lymphatic flow, and yarrow, which can encourage gentle sweating and is a longtime plant ally of mine. I really want to emphasize making a strong tea here because once it goes into the bath water, it's really being diluted a bit, right? So make the strong tea, and then I light a few candles, turn on my current favorite Torimus playlist, and then I add salt and Epsom salts to the bath as well. And nights that I do this are always my best nights of sleep. So this is why herbal baths can be especially supportive when stress or tension, fatigue, or even overwhelm are just part of the picture, right? So even if the original concern feels purely physical, baths often help because they address the nervous system alongside the body. Also, soaks don't have to be full body to be effective either, so you could do foot or hand soaks. Both offer surprisingly wide-reaching effects. They're a wonderful option when full baths aren't accessible or appealing, but you still want a remedy that works beyond just surface tissues. So herbal baths remind us that topical remedies don't have to be small or localized to be effective, right? Sometimes the most supportive approach is the one that invites the whole body to participate. All right, and then there are poultices. And honestly, I think these are some of the most effective topical remedies. So poultice is simply like fresh plant material or sometimes rehydrated dried herbs that are applied directly to the body. So there's no oil, there's no wax, there's no intermediary layer, right? It's just the plant itself in direct contact with the tissues. So because of that, poultices can actually often work more strongly than salves or cream because you're delivering the full complexity of the plant right where it's needed rather than like a diluted or just extracted version of it. When people take the time to apply a generous amount of fresh plant material to a specific area, the results can be surprising, right? Even to experienced herbalists. The downside of poultices, of course, is convenience. Poultices are not tidy. They take time, and they often work best with fresh plants, which means they're just not always accessible. But when they are available, they're well worth the effort. I think of poultices as being especially helpful for very localized situations, so pain, swelling, irritation, or injury where you want something strong, you want immediate contact between the plant and the tissue. So again, in these moments, I think poultices can often outperform a salve simply because it's more direct and there's a lot more plant material being used. So in a way here, it's like dosage is showing up in an important way. Often it's helpful to apply gentle heat over a poultice. Heat encourages circulation, which helps bring blood flow, and with it, oxygen and nutrients to the area. So that circulation can make a big difference, especially if tissues are tight or stagnant or just slow to heal. But that being said, heat isn't always appropriate if you're working with hot, inflamed situations like, say, a bee sting or acute irritation. Then cooling plants on their own might be exactly what's needed. So in those cases, the plants themselves help draw out the heat, they calm the tissue without adding warmth. And there's another thing worth mentioning. When you're able to harvest your own fresh plants, poultices can also be one of the simplest and least expensive remedies we have because there's no extraction process, there's no special equipment needed, no waiting, right? It's fresh plant material used directly right when it's needed. Of course, not everyone has access to fresh plants all the time, but when you do, this is incredible medicine that is just immediate and accessible. Poultices remind us that herbal medicine doesn't have to be refined or elegant to be effective. Sometimes the most direct approach, plant to body, no frills, is the one that works best. All right, then there are suppositories, which work with the parts of the body where the sun doesn't typically shine. This is a form of topical medicine that people don't always think of as topical because we do use it kind of internally, but it absolutely is, right? Suppositories are solid preparations. They're often made with herbs and oils and then some type of butters that are designed to melt at body temperature. So they're delivering herbs directly to mucosal tissue. And because mucosal tissue absorbs differently than the skin, suppositories allow herbs to act in a very direct, localized way, right? They bypass digestion entirely, which can be helpful when oral dosing just isn't appropriate or when you want the medicine to stay focused in the specific area. So herbal suppositories have traditionally been used for things like hemorrhoids, rectal irritation, pelvic discomfort, vaginal dryness, or tissue that needs soothing, moistening, and gentle support. In these situations, suppositories can be surprisingly effective because they bring the herbs right to the tissues rather than asking the whole system to do the work. And like other topical remedies, suppositories are about matching to the form that's needed. So they're not meant to replace internal remedies when systemic support is required, but they can be a very appropriate choice when the tissue is local and direct support is needed. Including suppositories in our understanding of topical herbal medicine really helps broaden the definition besides things we rub on our skin, right? It reminds us that topical work is really about choosing the most appropriate point of contact with the body, whether that's skin, tissue, or mucosa. And it's another reminder that some of the most powerful topical remedies never make it into a cute jar. Hey friends, it's Rosalee. If you've been nourished by this podcast, if it's helped you feel more connected to the plants or more grounded in your own herbal path, then I'd love to invite you to join the Herbs with Rosalee podcast circle. This special membership helps make the podcast possible. It supports everything we do behind the scenes, and it gives you a chance to go even deeper with the content that you love. Inside the circle, you'll get exclusive herbal resources, live classes each season with some of my favorite herbal teachers, and a private space to connect with fellow plant lovers. It's where the heart of our herbal community continues to grow. To learn more and join us, visit herbalpodcastcircle.com. Your support means the world, and it helps this podcast continue to bloom. Okay, before we wrap up, a quick note about DMSO. So I want to address this because I've had a few people asking whether I would speak on it, do an episode on it especially. So DMSO is often described as this topical substance that can carry things very deeply into the body. And that description is actually part of why it deserves real caution. So DMSO is not an herb. It doesn't behave like herbal topical remedies. And one of its defining features is, like I said, it penetrates extremely deeply and it can carry other substances, whatever that happens to be on the skin, directly into the bloodstream. So that includes things you possibly don't want moving in the body, like environmental chemicals, residues, and contaminants, which can be in the DMSO itself. So from an herbalist perspective, this puts DMSO in a very different category. Herbal topical remedies, they tend to work with the body's tissues and circulation and signaling systems in a more moderated way. Even the more penetrating preparations like Liniments or Fomentations still have natural limits and feedback built into them, and DMSO bypasses many of those safeguards. So of course, this doesn't mean that it's like always extremely dangerous, but there's a complicated history there. And it does mean that it just doesn't fit into the way that I teach herbal medicine, especially when we're talking about home use, safety, and building long-term relationships with plants. So that's my perspective. I'm not into it. I think there are serious safety concerns there, but there's also research worth looking at here. A study published in the journal Molecules compared DMSO with water and alcohol as solvents across a range of medicinal plants. Cool study. So the researchers specifically looked at how well each solvent extracted different groups of compounds, including phenolics, flavonoids, antioxidants, pigments, and minerals, using both fresh or frozen plants and dried herbs. What they found was super interesting. So DMSO did extract certain compounds very efficiently, but mostly when working with fresh or frozen plant material. When dried herbs were used, DMSO did not outperform water or alcohol. And in many cases, water and alcohol, especially a combination of the two, performed just as well or better for extracting compounds that are most relevant to herbal medicine. The researchers ultimately concluded that drying herbs and extracting them with around 50% alcohol was one of the most effective and practical approaches overall. So all of that together is why DMSO isn't something I recommend or teach as a topical remedy, because both safety concerns and because water and alcohol, which are time-tested, work extremely well. For me, herbal discernment is about knowing not just what can be used, but what should be used and when a tool is simply too blunt or too risky for the job. And that really brings us back to the heart of today's episode, choosing the right doorway into the body with intention and care. Okay, so let's recap a bit. When do topical remedies truly shine? Well, they tend to work best when the issue is acute and localized, when something is happening right there in the tissues. This includes situations involving inflammation, soreness, tension, or irritation. All of those great fit for topical care. You can think about sore muscles, minor injuries, joint discomfort, skin irritation, or localized pain. So places where you can bring the remedy directly to the area that needs support. Topical remedies are also incredibly supportive for the nervous system, right? Because touch matters, rubbing the things in, warmth matters. Even the simple act of applying a remedy can just be calming and regulating. And that physical interaction with the body is absolutely part of the medicine. One of the reasons topical remedies can feel so effective is because they work right where the issue lives. They interact directly with local tissues, they influence circulation and lymphatic movement, and then they send signals through the nervous system. So when the problem is right there and the remedy meets it right where it lives, topical medicine can feel almost miraculous. So here's when topical remedies don't work or simply aren't enough. This is where discernment really comes in. So topical remedies often fall short when we're dealing with issues that are chronic or systemic in nature. Things like long-standing hormonal or digestive patterns, or inflammation that's maybe rooted in stress or lifestyle or just deeper imbalances. So in these situations, topical remedies can still play an important role. So a salve, a cream, or a wash might soothe the skin, reduce irritation, or make someone feel more comfortable in their body. But on their own, they usually aren't enough to resolve what's happening underneath. And that's not a failure, right? This isn't a failure of topical medicine. It's just a mismatch between the tool and the task. So let's look at some examples. Acne, fantastic example of this. Topical remedies can calm inflammation. They can support healing and really just help the skin feel less reactive. But acne often has deeper roots, right? Hormonal shifts, digestive patterns, stress, systemic inflammation. In these cases, topical care works best as a broader part of an approach that also includes internal support and lifestyle considerations. Rosacea is another condition where people often focus entirely on the external treatment, right? And yes, gentle topical remedies can absolutely help soothe the skin and reduce irritation, but rosacea frequently reflects deeper patterns such as systemic inflammation, nervous system reactivity, or even digestive imbalances. So when those internal pieces aren't addressed, topical care alone tends to hit a limit. And then when we expect topical remedies to fully resolve those issues that require systemic care, we can end up like a bit disappointed or just confused, like why didn't the herbs work, right? But when we understand the role topical medicine is meant to play, it becomes a powerful complement rather than a frustrating dead end. So all of this points to something bigger, right? Becoming an herbalist isn't simply about collecting more and more recipes. It's about learning discernment. It's about developing the ability to recognize which form of medicine belongs in a given moment. Sometimes that means reaching for a topical remedy. Sometimes it means supporting the body internally, and very often it means using both together in a way that makes sense for the person and the given situation. This kind of decision making doesn't come from memorizing formulas or following rigid rules. It grows from understanding bodies, noticing patterns, paying attention to timing, and working within that context. So over time, you begin to see how different forms of medicine complement one or another, and how choosing the right form can make all the difference. So as we wrap up, I just want to zoom out for a moment. So everything we've talked about today, infused oils, salves, liniments, baths, poultices, suppositories, it all comes back to one core skill: learning to choose the right form of medicine for the situation in front of you. That's the heart of herbalism, and it's something that develops over time with practice and reflection and support. Inside Rooted Medicine Circle, we spend months exploring exactly this, learning how to work confidently with a wide range of herbal preparations, and more importantly, how to decide when to use each one. It's a deep, immersive course designed to help people move beyond guessing and into real discernment. But before enrollment opens for the full Rooted Medicine Circle, we offer something a little smaller. This is a way to get a feel for this approach and see if it resonates with you. Next week, my friend and co-teacher Emily Hahn and I will be opening access to the Rooted Medicine mini course. This is a free series designed to give you a taste of how we teach and how we think about herbal medicine. The mini course includes a webinar called How to Avoid Common Herbal Pitfalls so that you can make powerful herbal remedies that heal. There's a live class on advanced tea making and a guided exercise focused on taking your herbal practice to the next level by moving beyond simple recipes into real connection with plants. This invitation is a way to explore whether this way of learning herbalism feels like it's the right fit for you. So if this sounds interesting, you can join the waitlist for the Rooted Medicine Circle mini course by checking out the link in the show notes. Everyone on the waitlist will get access as soon as it opens. Thanks so much for spending this time with me today. I hope this episode helped you to see topical herbal remedies with a little more clarity and a lot more confidence. I look forward to seeing you in the Rooted Medicine mini course. This podcast is made possible, in part, by our awesome students. This week's student spotlight is on Jenny Wilkinson in Nevada. Jenny has been part of our community for many years, participating in Rooted Medicine Circle from 2021 through 2025, along with the Herbal Energetics course, the Healing Power of Teas, and the Podcast Circle. Her capstone project in Rooted Medicine Circle grew from noticing the stress her coworkers were carrying, and then asking how herbs could help in a simple and supportive way. So she created a presentation on herbal teas for a staff meeting and developed a plan for a workplace tea station, sharing plant medicine through this everyday ritual of brewing a cup of tea. I love this so much. I think every workplace could use it. Well done, Jenny. Her work beautifully shows how accessible and relational herbalism can be. To honor her contributions, Mountain Rose Herbs is sending Jenny a $50 gift certificate to stock up on their incredible selection of organically and sustainably sourced herbal supplies. Thank you so much to Mountain Rose Herbs for supporting our amazing students. And if you'd like to study with me and live out your dreams of being an herbalist, you can check out my foundational courses at herbswithrosalee.com.